पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः। परमादरणीयानां प्राध्यापकानां राघवन महोदयानां चरणकमलयोः मम साष्टांग नमस्काराः। आदरणीयाः श्री राधावल्लभ त्रिपाठी महाभागाः, पितृभक्ता नर्तकी श्रेष्ठा श्रीमती नंदिनी महाभागा, तत्कुटुंब सदस्याः, सम्मान्याः सभासदः, अनेके प्रमुखाः प्राध्यापकाः अत्र सन्ति, श्रीनिरुद्धदास महोदयाः, एवम् अनेके विद्वांसः अत्र समुपस्थिताः। सर्वेषां वः मम साञ्जलिबन्ध प्रणामाः। अवसरे अस्मिन् वेदानुभूति विषये प्रवचनं कर्तुम् अवसरं प्राप्य आत्मानमहं धन्यं मन्ये। As this is the Jayanti Utsava of the eminent professor Sri Raghavan, who is a Sanskrit scholar par excellence, I chose to speak a few words in Sanskritam initially. Henceforth I will continue in English. So, I am really honored to be invited to deliver a lecture on the Vedas, Veda Anubhuti. So, with reverence, I salute all my teachers who have taught me Vedas and Shastrartha, and to whatever extent I have grasped, I am really grateful to them. I remember one verse penned by Dr. Raghavan at the end of his monumental PhD work. He writes, Swabuddhi mrittika shvena samatari nadi katham nanu potayitam premna gurupadambu janmana. So I recollect this often, and this is a very appropriate occasion to recollect that verse. So how would my intellect is like a mud horse. My intellect is mrittika ashwa. So how did I cross this ocean of great knowledge? Nanu potayitam premna. It is the feet of the Guru that has helped me, and it acted as a raft that helped me cross this great ocean. So I recollect all my teachers, and I salute them, because Vedic tradition is not without teachers. So Guru Parampara is very essential or very important in the Vedic tradition. So right from my Vedic teacher Shri Kamalakara Bhatta, Veda Brahma Kamalakara Bhatta, to Shri Krishnamacharya, in whose institution I now continue my pursuit of research on yoga. I salute all the eminent Vedic teachers. Now my topic is Veda Anubhuti. Kalohayam Niravadhihi Satyam. The time is without any end. But this program, Eshaha Karyakramaha, this program is Savadhi. There is a time restriction. And the topic, Veda Anubhuti. Normally, Anubhuti is not expressed. It is only experienced. And so, there is no, how proper would it be to speak about Anubhuti? And then Vedas themselves, Anantavai Vedaha, that's how Vaitariya Brahmana puts it. So, in both these aspects, they are beyond yato vacho nivartante. They are beyond expression in words, both the Vedas and the Anubhuti. Now I have been given the onerous task of describing what the Vedas speak about Vedanubhuti, and this will clearly bring out my Mritikashvatva, that is the mud horse nature, that will be very evident at the end of the talk. Because such is the subject, such is the gravity or the importance or the depth of the subject which I have been given to handle. But within whatever time is available, I divide my talk into two parts. One is on the Vedas, a few aspects on the Vedas, and then insights on Anubhuti from the Vedas. So, at the outset, I would like to try the pizza effect. Pizza is very popular, right? In all these places, all over the world. So, a small history about what pizza is. Everyone knows, everyone has tasted, but there is a small history about pizza. Pizza, the birthplace of pizza is Italy. Yes. Okay. So, in this theory, the pizza effect, this theory was proposed by Swami Agehananda Bharati, who was born as Leopold Fischer. He was a person born in the West, and he became a Hindu monk, and he taught in Los Angeles and spent his time there. So he proposed this theory called the pizza theory or pizza effect. What is it? So the birthplace of pizza is Italy. It is like our idli dosa. In Italy, people did not have very great respect towards idli and dosa, right? On pizza, as it's a day-to-day affair, right? In India, about idli and dosa. Similarly, that was the kind of outlook they had about the pizza. Some American came and then he took it to. He was amazed by this preparation, this pizza, and he took it to America, and it became a craze there in America. And then, when pizza returned to Italy, it became very popular, extremely popular. So, similar is the nature of our own treasure trove of wisdom in the form of Vedas and other things. Yes, it is like we are sitting on the treasure, but we do not know, or we seldom realize that we are the great inheritors of great wisdom. So if some testimony from a Westerner comes, then immediately, oh, Vedas are really great, we realize that. So, in that direction, I just present the observations, interesting anecdote from the life of Max Muller. He was the one who translated the Rig Veda and various other Vedic texts. He was the one who took the Vedic text to the West in a very systematic and authentic way. This happened, this anecdote is reported in the North American Journal, written by one Moncure Conway, who was a literary critic. The article was published in the year 1900. Moncure Conway writes this article, Memories of Max Muller. Just after his passing away in 1899, he pens this article in this journal, and then he mentions this anecdote. Though there are various versions in which this anecdote is stated, I present from the journal itself what this article or what this particular anecdote is all about. There was a gadget which was invented earlier, that is phonogram, which is the great grandmother of our DVD player. So that phonogram was invented. After that, the gramophone came, and various other retrieval mechanisms gradually emerged from that. So when that phonogram was there, it was very popular. So everyone wanted to try it out. And one British MP during that period, the lifetimes of Max Muller, one British MP, Fletcher Moulton, he purchased this phonogram, and then he wanted to invite some eminent scholar to speak into that phonogram. You know that phonogram will reproduce what is spoken into it as it is, without a change. That was a wonderful scientific achievement those days. So this Fletcher Moulton organized a sabha in his house. He placed that phonogram in front, and then he invited Professor Max Muller to that event, so that he wanted to record the voice of Max Muller and play it. And he had invited many people in that to attend that event. So what happened is, Professor Max Muller came and many people gathered in that occasion, and then he requested Max Muller, and Max Muller stood and he spoke something. He uttered something. I read out from that article. There was a burst of merriment when these queer sounds came from the machine. It was recorded and then played back. Whatever Max Muller spoke, it was recorded and played back, and the Conway says there was a burst of merriment when these queer sounds came from the machine. But a deep silence when Max Muller explained that we had heard words from the oldest hymn in the world, Agnimile Purohitam Yajnasya Devam Ritvijam Otaram Ratnadhatamam. So, this is the verse that he chanted, which was recorded in that phonogram. And then the author of this article continues, and then he started explaining the meaning as to how Agni is very essential for the progress of any civilization, and Rigveda's very first mantra is about Agni. With the invention or with harnessing the fire, human civilization progressed leaps and bounds. So such Agni is given a place of prominence in the Vedic culture. So and in this way he presented the importance and relevance and the greatness of Vedic literature. And also he said, Max Muller said that this Vedic knowledge, these Vedic mantras and hymns that you hear, they are not only in the form of texts, but this is a living tradition. And he says, in a phonographic way, each generation uttering precisely what was poured into its ear by the preceding generation. See, it was an event to introduce that phonogram, and the preservation of Agnimile happened in a very phonographic way. See, the machine will not distort unless there is some problem in the gadget. The machine will not distort whatever is spoken into it. It will in a very true way, accurately, it will repeat whatever is spoken into it. And our Vedic tradition, the Guru Shishya Parampara, the Anujana Guru Shishya Parampara, unbroken tradition of Guru and Shishya Parampara, is a phonographic tradition, as accurate. The Vedas are preserved in such a manner. So all these are recorded in this. And then finally, this is one remarkable comment that Conway records in this particular article. He says that when he spoke about Max Muller in that event, when he spoke about the importance, greatness of the Vedas, then what happened? To whom he spoke initially, the explanation cast a poetic spell not merely on the learned, but on fashionable young ladies and gentlemen in drawing rooms throughout Europe and America, and adding vast estates to their mind, delivering them from the mere pinhole views of humanity and of the universe. That's how he presents. So, Vedic knowledge, according to Max Muller, delivers us from the mere pinhole view of humanity and universe and adds vast estates of knowledge to our intellect or the minds. So this is the Pisa effect. I am concluding the Pisa effect here. So these are the words of Max Muller on the greatness of the Vedas. So though the Vedas have vastly shrunk, in a very great way the Vedas have shrunk. It is used to, it's recorded in Patanjala Mahabhashya that there were 1131 branches of all the four Vedas put together, Sahasravatma Sama, Ekavimshatidha Bahkricham, Shatam Advaryu Shakaha and Dasha Atharva Veda Shakaha. So there were totally 1131 branches of Vedas, and currently we have 7 to 10 branches of the Vedas. But still, even today, with the available Vedic knowledge, that itself is very ennobling, very elevating and very enlightening if we care to study and understand what the Vedas hold for us, the treasure house of knowledge. So this is about the first aspect, the Vedas. And then, now I come to the Vedanubhuti. Now, Anubhuti, to me, I see it in two ways. If taken in the real sense, Anubhuti, as I mentioned initially, it is realization. So, realization of Atma. So, Anubhuti, Atmanubhuti is the ultimate Anubhuti. Swarupe Avasthanam, being established in one's own true conscious nature. That is Atmanubhuti. That is one kind of Anubhuti. And the other Anubhuti that we are part of in our day-to-day life is Lokanubhuti or Laukikanubhuti. Day-to-day life we experience, we encounter, we come across various situations and we are exposed to various occasions and experiences. So that is two kinds of Anubhuti. One is Atmanubhuti, the ultimate Anubhuti, and the Lokanubhuti. Maharshi Aurobindo, in his work, Foundations of Indian Culture, he writes that the Vedic literature is grossly misunderstood. It is said about the Vedic culture that, or the Vedic literature and the knowledge therein, to be otherworldly. Always think about something otherworldly, and it always orders a march towards a general marching orders are given to everyone to go to hermitages and forests and the foothills of Himalayas. And so entirely Vedic literature is otherworldly. It has nothing to do with our day-to-day life experiences. This is not true. This is what Aurobindo records in his work, Foundations of Indian Culture. That's a very interesting and important work, a fundamental work to understand what Indian culture is. So, Vedas have equal or greater inputs on Lokanubhuti as it has on Atmanubhuti. So let's see, within the limited time availability, a few nuggets, a few aspects of wisdom regarding Atmanubhuti and also Lokanubhuti from the Vedas. Now, when I speak about Atmanubhuti, don't be worried, I will not be giving a philosophical lecture here on what is the nature of Atman, how to realize the Atman, no. Because one thing, as I mentioned, it is an aspect of realization. So, Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyaha. The Upanishads are very clear. You cannot attain Atman by attending Pravachanas. So, I will not venture into describing Atmanubhuti or the nature of Atman, all that is there, and that has to be spoken by a realized soul or a person who has achieved a greater level of progress in Atma Sadhana. Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti Aniyan Hyatarkyam Anupramana. This is Kathopanishad statement which says Ananya Prokte, a person who has become one with the Atman, he has to speak about the Atman. Then Gatiratra Nasti, in the sense that the mind will not waver after having received knowledge from such an Atmajnani. So one is certainly guided to self-realization. If such a person speaks on Atmanubhuti, I come nowhere near this. So don't worry, I will not speak about nature of soul and other things here. So what I propose to present as part of Atmanubhuti from the Vedas is the Upanishadic anecdotes, a few very popular Upanishadic anecdotes which describe essential virtues which will help a person to gradually prepare himself and move towards receiving that higher Atma Anubhava. The Upanishads, they always have fascinated me right from my studenthood. I have always been inspired by the Upanishadic anecdotes. Even my PhD thesis was inspired by the Upanishadic systematic thought and the values that the Upanishadic anecdotes impart. They have inspired me always, and hence I would like to share a couple of instances from the Upanishads which speak about essential values that every individual aspiring to attain that Atmanubhuti should nurture in himself. We heard Bhriguvalli being chanted initially. So it's a coincidence that I also have selected one such thing from verse from the Bhriguvalli. So it's a story, it's known to most of you. Bhrigurvaivarunihi Varunam Pitaram Upasasara Bhrigu, son of Varuna, he goes to his father Upasasara. Why does he go? Adhihi Bhagavo Brahmeti, teach me Brahman. So what does the father do? Tadum hovacha tapasa brahma vijijñāsasva. To him, the father says, these are the teachers of Brahman. So I am teaching you Brahman. No, he doesn't say that. He gives him the tool. Tapasa brahma vijijñāsasva. Tapas is the tool. Tapo brahmeti. So do tapas, and by that you prepare yourself to explore and unravel the Brahman, the consciousness. So to me, tapas is one that, as revealed from this particular anecdote or the instance from the Upanishad, tapas is a very essential quality that will take a person towards Atmanubhuti. Na atapasvinaha yogaha siddhyati. This is what Vyasa in his commentary to Yoga Sutra mentioned. So tapas is very essential even as part of yoga sadhana also. Now, tapas is one such term which has various innumerable connotations. In the context of Bhrigu Varuna Samvada, what is tapas? Tapas is single pointed focus with commitment, probing the subject as to what Brahman is. So that is tapas in the context of that Bhrigu Varuna Samvada, which is an essential quality for a student. But the interesting aspect or interesting input from on tapas comes from Sayana Bhashya. Sayana's commentary to this Taittiriya Upanishad adds a very wonderful idea on what tapas means, which is very relevant to people in every station of life. Now when we hear that, some Bhrigu performed tapas and then he understood Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, these are things achieved by great Maharshis and sages. How can we be tapasvins? We are normal, worldly people. Is tapas can we do tapas? Can we become tapasvins? To that, the input from Sayanacharya's commentary is very, very valuable. He presents tapas according to the ashrama system: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. In each of these ashrama, all of us here are part of any one particular ashrama, either Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha or Sannyasa. For a Brahmachari, what is tapas? So it is an adaptation. According to one's stage of life, one can still perform tapas. It's not that one has to go to a forest to perform tapas. In the very place, that's why the Upanishads also reaffirm Atra Brahma Samashnute. Brahma can be realized here. Brahman can be realized here itself. No need to go anywhere. For that, tapas is a very essential tool. So what is a tapas for a brahmachari? Sayanacharya quotes, Tapo hi swadhyayaha. For a brahmachari, swadhyaya, single pointed focus on studies, is tapas. And it is the most difficult thing to perform for a brahmachari. So tapas is always difficult to perform for a brahmachari or a person in his studenthood. What is the most difficult thing to do? Swadhyaya. Now, the next ashrama is Grihastha ashrama. Now you have to tell me, what is the most difficult thing for a Grihastha? For a brahmachari, sitting and studying is most difficult thing. So that has been made as tapas. So for a Grihastha, what is tapas? What is so difficult for a Grihastha? The answer is with me. That is, Sayanacharya in the 14th century has given us the answer, but just I am leaving it to your imagination. What might be tapas for a Grihastha? And that they naturally do. Sayanacharya says that he quotes, again from a Vedic text, he quotes, Etat khalu vavatapa ityahuhu yaswandadati. This is indeed tapas for a grihastha who shares his wealth with others. So Danam is tapas for a grihastha. In grihasthashrama, the flow of material wealth will be towards a person in grihasthashrama. So the most difficult thing is to share sampat samvibhagaha, sampat vinimayaha. It's very difficult in grihasthashrama, and hence that has been prescribed by Sayanacharya as tapas for grihasthas. But it is not impossible, right? Am I right? Yes. So it is doable, but difficult. We understand that. Hard-earned money, right? So that is grihasthashrama's tapas. So a brahmachari can be a tapasvi if he does swadhyaya. A grihastha can be a tapasvi if he does dana. And then now comes vanaprastha. What is tapas for a vanaprastha? Again, you can imagine, but again I'll just proceed so that I save some time also. So vanaprastha is in a retiring phase. So retirement starts where it doesn't begin in the office. Retirement does not begin in the office when one reaches the age of superannuation. That's where we associate retirement with. But see the insights of the Vedic tradition. Where does the retirement begin from? Retirement begins from food. Tapo nanashanat param. The mantra says, Anashanat param tapaha nasti. There is no greater tapas than upavasa. So, for a vanaprastha, a person who slowly wants to withdraw and slowly wants to focus towards higher things in life, where should he start his withdrawal? From food. From food. He has to reduce his preferences there. Then he becomes, but it's very difficult for a vanaprastha because in grihastha he would have been accustomed to that morning bed coffee, right? So it's very difficult to overcome all those things. The set patterns of food consumption, preferences. So that is tapas. So a vanaprastha can be a tapasvi if he practices, slowly starts inculcating upavasa. And finally, all these are the inputs with quotations from the Vedas presented by Sayanacharya, so that every ashrami can be a tapasvi. And what is tapas for a sannyasi? What else can be tapas for a sannyasi? Aikagryam paramam tapaha. Single pointed focus on the Brahman. That is tapas, and nothing beyond that is expected in the final stages. On the self. Drishyate tu agriya buddhya, the Kathopanishad says, making the mind one pointed on the self, that is tapas. And is it easy? At the fourth quarter of human life, Shankaracharya beautifully puts, Vriddhas tavat chinta magnaha pare brahmani kopi na sakta. So, at the final stages of life, one is engulfed with n number of anxieties and worries, and single pointed focus is very, very difficult, but it is still possible and it is prescribed by the Vedas. So aikagryam paramam tapaha, that is a tapas according to Sayanacharya for a sannyasi. So Bhrigu is a tapasvi, and we too can become tapasvis, and gradually by our own tapas prescribed for our own stage of life, we can also attain Chitta Shuddhi and prepare ourselves for Atmanubhuti. So this is one idea or one insight from the Vedas. There are many such inputs from the Upanishadic and Vedic lore that helps us prepare well for Atmanubhuti. I'll just quote one more instance with regard to Atmanubhuti from the Upanishadic section of the Vedas. It is from the Prashna Upanishad. The Upanishad begins like this: Sukesha cha Bharadvajascha Shaivyascha Satyakama Sauryayani Gargyaha Kausalyascha Ashvalayanaha Bhargavo Vaidarbhi Kabandhi Katyayanaha Tehaite Brahmapara Brahmanishtha Param Brahman Veshamana Esha Vai Tat Sarvam Vakshyati Bhagavantam Pippaladam Upasannaha. Some 6 scholars, already Brahmaparaha, already Brahmanishtaha, but Param Brahma Anveshamanaha. They already possess some knowledge about the Brahman. They themselves are teachers. But still they are not very sure about whether what they know about Brahman is really Brahman. So they went to Pippalada Maharshi. This is an Atharva Vediya Upanishad. So they went to Pippalada Maharshi and then they put forward their request. Kindly teach us. Esha Havai Tat Sarvam Vakshyati. This Pippalada is a great sage. He might teach us everything. So kindly teach us this Brahman. Enlighten us on Brahman. So what does the teacher do? What did Pippalada do? He says, Tan Harishiruvacha. To them the Rishi says, Bhuya eva tapasa brahmacharyena shraddhaya samvatsaram samvatsyatha. Did he teach? Did Pippalada teach? No. Go back. Prepare yourself with tapas. Prepare yourself with brahmacharya. Prepare yourself with shraddha. And live with samvatsaram samvatsyatha. Live with these for an year. Live with an intensified shraddha. Live with intensified tapas. Live with intensified brahmacharya. And live with intensified desire for your question. And come back after a year. So normally when we are inquisitive about a particular subject, we seek a resource person, and when we go to him and if he says something like this, what will happen to us? We will be disillusioned. Why this person is not giving me the answer? Or we'll have a Mahavidvisha, we'll get a dvesha about the teacher. Why is he not sharing this knowledge with me? It's very frustrating. But all these 6 went back, and then they came back after a year of intensified tapas, brahmacharya and shraddha. So this again, this very initial mantra of Prashnopanishad establishes the very important quality of not losing motivation, because this knowledge of Atman is not very easily accessible. Even when there is a Shrunvanto api bahavo yamna vidyuhu, even after hearing this, many people do not understand. Ascharyo vakta kushalosya labdha, ascharyo jnata kushalanushishta. So normally we don't get teachers on these. Even when there is a teacher teaching this particular subject, this is not very easy. So even more difficult when a teacher rejects, go back, reduces the initial motivation, it's more difficult. So in this path of Atmanubhuti, this path of realizing the self, the Upanishad says, Durgam pathaha tat kavayo vadanti. Great wise men, they say that this is not an easy path to tread on. Durgam pathaha, very difficult to traverse on this path. So another important value that we get from this Upanishadic anecdote is not to lose that motivation and stay focused towards realizing this Atmanubhuti. So we just saw from the couple of anecdotes, one from the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is my Swashakha, and also this Atharva Vediya Prashnopanishad, that tapas, brahmacharya, and sustained motivation, all these are essential towards Atmanubhuti, towards preparing ourselves to this Atmanubhuti. I think these ideas are very relevant even now. Now to the second aspect of it, Lokanubhuti. So all these are very wonderful to hear, but as Patanjali would put it in his Yoga Sutra, Dirghakala, Nairantarya, Satkara, Asevitaha, Dridhabhumihi. All these qualities, though very good to hear, to be inculcated, have to be practiced, have to be made deep rooted in our mind by Dirghakala, long term practice, Nairantarya, consistent practice, Satkara, with great amount of respect, we have to do this. Then all these will take root in our mind. So this is a long drawn process. Of course, this is a long term project that everyone aspires to take, but only a few embark upon. So this is one aspect of the Veda Anubhuti, Atma Anubhuti aspect of the Vedas. Now which is the Lokanubhuti or Laukikanubhuti, which is closer to our day-to-day life. What are the ideas? There are many. But again, due to paucity of time, I just present a couple here on ideas, a few remarkable ideas from the Vedas about Lokanubhuti, how to add quality to our life. We live a life, we undergo various experiences, how to add value to that? What are the inputs from the Vedas in that regard? There are many such ideas from the Vedas. The Vedas sets the goal as to what are the ideal goals that one can have. Not the Brahman, realization of Brahman, that part we have crossed. Now we have entered into the realm of this Vyavaharika Satya. So what are all the worthy goals to be pursued in this worldly life? The Taittiriya Aranyaka, Chaturtha Prashna. It's a very popular mantra, but as it is part of rituals, we don't reflect upon the meanings of it. It actually presents the goal of life. Pashyema Sharadashatam, Jivema Sharadashatam, Nandama Sharadashatam, Modama Sharadashatam, Bhavama Sharadashatam, Shrinavama Sharadashatam, Prabravama Sharadashatam, Ajitasyama Sharadashatam. These are the goals of life. This mantra is part of Apastamba Sandhyavandana, and hence one never reflects upon the meanings of it, never sees this as goal of life prescribed by the rishis, worthy goals. Let us live 100 years, Pashyema, let us see 100 years of life. That itself is a great thing. In this world of junk foods and fast foods, we fail at the very first entrance itself. We fail at the entrance test. After that come the other higher goals. Jivema Sharadashatam. Let us be endowed with vigor, Jivana, for all the 100 years. And Krishnamacharya is a shining example of Jivema Sharadashatam. When he experienced a hip fracture when he was around 92, 93 years old, his son and great teacher Sri Deshikacharya offered to take him to hospital. He said, don't worry, I can heal myself. So that's what he did. He did not go to the hospital and healed himself at the age of 93 and went on to live a complete 100 years. A Vaidika, the goal of Sharadashatam was realized by Krishnamacharya by his Veda Bala and also Yoga Bala. So that is one Jivema Sharadashatam. One is very vigorous till 100 years. That is the second thing. And then Nandama Sharadashatam. Nandama, let's be happy. Modama, let's be happy. What is the difference between Nandama and Modama? We need to go into the commentaries to understand the subtle very interesting difference between Nandama and Modama. Nandama is Dravyaihi Samruddhaha Bhuyasma. Let us attain wealth in plenty. Dravyaihi Samruddhaha Bhuyasma. Is this statement not enough to state or to show that Vedas are there to help us to lead a very healthy and prosperous life? Who says Vedas is otherworldly? So, Nandama, let's attain all the means for a prosperous life. And then what is Modama? Tad bhogena hrishtaha bhavamaha. We have all the means, but I am not healthy enough to experience all those things. I have a plate full of laddu, but my sugar levels are also very high. So there is Nandama, but not Modama. So let me attain all means for prosperity and let me experience and derive the happiness from those for all the 100 years that I live. And then Bhavama, this is a fantastic piece of idea that is given here. Sayanacharya has to be saluted for this. He says, Bhavama, let us exist. It's very simple, everyone exists. The commentator adds, Swasthane Bhavamaha. Let us stay where we are. In the sense, let us serve the place where we are. Let's not just, it's of course, we travel and gain a lot of knowledge, but where should we be essentially? In the place where we are born. So, and to the place where we are born, all our contribution should be. That idea of patriotism, we subtly find in this Bhavama Sharadashatam statement. And Shrinavama Sharadashatam. Does the Vedas, this is what differentiates Vedas from other literature. So far what we have seen is utter materialism. Gain wealth, enjoy it, just stay healthy. All this is normal materialistic way of putting things. But the Vedas do not prescribe only this much. The next part of it makes it stand out. Shrinavama Sharadashatam. Living all the 100 years, what should we do? Shrinavama. Veda Shastra Rahasyam Guru Mukhad Avagacchamaha. Let us learn. Let's keep learning. Till when? Sharadashatam. For 100 years, let us keep learning. My father used to share an anecdote about learning, keep learning till the end. A very old gentleman, 92 years old, he started learning a new language. And then someone asked that, why do you venture upon this? You should just relax in an easy chair and read a day-to-day newspaper and just be happy that way. Why do you trouble yourself learning this? He says that now I start learning and then this will create the foundation so that in the next birth I can continue from where I have left. So this idea of learning till the end has deep connections with our karma theory. So we don't see life ending with this life, say with this particular 100 years or whatever it is. So let's keep learning till 100 years so that it prepares the ground for the next birth. So that way life is a cyclic affair. So that is Bhavama Sharadashatam, Shrinavama Sharadashatam. And should we learn and learn? What should we do with the knowledge that we gain with this? Prabhravama Sharadashatam. Shishyebhyaha Prakarshena Kathayamaha. Let us teach it to the students Prakarshena. With all our efforts, with deep commitment to teaching, let us share our knowledge. Let's not withhold anything with us. The Prashno I was about to quote, but again for paucity of time I am not presenting it. In the Prashnopanishad, it states that if a teacher does not share his knowledge, what will happen to him? Samulova esha parishushyati yaha anrutam abhivadati. Knowing a subject, if a teacher does not teach or share it with an inquisitive student, what will happen? Samulaha parishushyati yaha anrutam abhivadati. If he knows the subject and says, I do not know, out of whatever reason, he will drive from the root. Tasmat narhami anrutam vaktum. Sukesha, one great seer, he says, I really do not know about the subject of which you are asking. Because what is drying up of a teacher? What can be drying up of knowledge of a teacher? It's knowledge. Knowledge which dries out if he does not share. We know that vyaye krite vardhata eva nityam. Wealth is, or that is, the wealth of knowledge is that which grows with sharing. And if we withhold with it, anabhyase visham vidya, it will become toxic and it will even kill us. That way, so prabravama sharadashatam, and finally ajitasyam, let us not be conquered by anyone. So that is the spirit, Vedic spirit, how to lead life. I should never be conquered by anyone, I should always be successful. This is the idea of the goals, the worthy goals that are presented in this. And what is not being conquered by anyone? The ultimate conquest is the conquest of death, attaining immortality. So that again finally becomes the goal here. Thus we see from the Vedic lore that even for our day-to-day laukika anubhava, it presents worthy goals. There is no study of the Vedas. Then comes analyzing the meaning of the Vedas to unravel such wonderful life-guiding principles in the Vedas. I'll just end with one final instance from the Vedas. See, dinner time is approaching, so I would like to state something on the food. The Vedas have so many ideas on food consumption. The Vedas say, talk to the food that you are eating. Shivoma visha pradahaya. Speak to the food. What should you address? What do you speak? What should you speak with your food? Shivaha. Be the one who gives well-being. Shivaha, Mangalam, Bhadram. Do good for me. Ma Visha, enter me, Mam, enter into me, becoming Shiva, being very auspicious, making, giving me all the nourishment, enter me. That's how we have to speak to the food. Apradahaya, daha, don't burn me. So this is how we have to speak to the food. This is a mantra from Mahanarayana Upanishad. Whenever we do Parishechanam, we say Pranaya Swaha, Panaya Swaha, Vyanaya Swaha, Samanaya Swaha, Udanaya Swaha, Brahmane Swaha. The entire, that is the absolute abridged version of this mantra. Shivoma Visha Pradahaya, Pranaya Swaha, Shraddhayam Prane Nivishto Mritan Juhomi, Shivoma Visha Pradahaya, Apanaya Swaha, Shraddhayam Udane Nivishto Mritan Juhomi, Shivoma Visha Pradahaya, Udanaya Swaha, Shraddhayadum Samane Nivishto Mritan Juhomi, Shivoma Visha Pradahaya. So with every particle of food that we are offering into our mouth, we have to say Shivaha Ma Visha Apradahaya. Will our food consumption not become more enjoyable when we talk with the food and not focus on the TV? Which includes me also, to be very sincere and truthful. I also watch TV. But at least at the level of understanding, I have gained this. Oh, this is what has to be done. At some part of time, I will also reform myself. So, this is about the food. And at the end of the food, there is one wonderful mantra. I will conclude with that. The last mantra that one has to utter after finishing one's meal for that particular portion of the day is Angushthamatrah Purushongushthanja Samashritah Isha Sarvasya Jagatah Prabhuh Prinati Vishwabhuk. This is the mantra. After completing one's food, one has to state this. What is this mantra? It says Angushthamatraha Purushaha. The size of the Atman, Purusha, is the length of an Angushta. Angushthanja Samashritaha. He is also present in the Angushta. Why is the Atman stated to have the size of an Angushta? So that one can meditate upon in the Hridaya. To that extent, Purusha is stated as Angushtha Matra. But the very next word says Angushthanja Samashritaha. He is also present in Angushta, which means he is present all over the body. That is, he pervades the entire body, including the Angushta. Why so many references to Angushta at the end of the foot? Let's see that. Angushthanja Samashritaha Ishaha Sarvasya Jagataha. The Lord of the entire universe, Prabhu, he is the one who controls everything. Prinatu, let him be happy. Vishwabhuk, who is the one who is really the one who consumes the food. So, the mantra says the Purusha or the Atman who has to be meditated upon to have the size of an Angushta, who pervades not only this body but as a controller, as an Antaryami of the entire universe. He pervades the entire universe, and he is the one who really undergoes all experiences, including consumption of the food. Let him be pleased with this activity of my food consumption. This is the mantra that this does not have any adhikari bheda. Whoever eats food can chant this. Whoever eats food can utter this mantra and do the anusandhana of this mantra. And now, why this mantra? Sayanacharya's commentary has to be noted here. The Pitika to this mantra is worth noting. He says that Bubhuksha Janita Chitta Vikshepa Shamanadurdhvam Pataniyaha Mantraha. This mantra is very significant from the yogic point of view. The mantra's meaning looks very simple and plain, just dedicating this activity of food consumption to the higher Lord. But what happens to our mind with relation to hunger and the satiation of hunger? What happens to our mind? We know that bubhukshitam na pratibhati kinchit. When a person is hungry, he cannot focus on anything. His mind will not be focused on anything. Pasivandal? I know that we are all in that state. Currently, I will conclude without troubling you much. So, bubhukshitam na pratibhati kinchit. So, our chitta vrittis will be absolutely disturbed when we are hungry. Okay, before getting hunger, what will we be doing, or what are we supposed to do? Again, another Vedantic verse says, Asuptehe amrite kalam nayed vedanta chintaya. That's what we are supposed to do. Till you fall asleep, till a person dies, one should focus all his mental energy on Vedantic thoughts, on the nature of self and other such things. But it is true that when this bubhuksha comes, hunger comes, na pratibhati kinchit, na va vedantaha pratibhati, na yogaha pratibhati, na sankhya shastram pratibhati, na va ayurvedaha. No shastra will come to the mind if this, even to a highly evolved person, sadhaka, if this bubhuksha has come, it will simply scatter all his chitta vrittis. Sayanacharya realize or acknowledges this fact. So mostly people will say that Sayanacharya's commentary is rejected. Mostly people will say, like Aurobindo and others, I do respect all his worthy contributions, but they will say that it's full of karmakanda, nothing of a greater insight. But this yogic insight as to what happens to the mind when bubhuksha sets in, chitta vikshepa will happen, and then when we consume food, what happens? That chitta vikshepa shamanam will happen. So the scattering of the mind, or the anxiety, or we would have fought just with an enemy. The Vedas say, Udaram vai vritraha Kshutkalu vai manushyasyya bhratravyah. Where is the Vritrasura? Our Udara is the Vritrasura. Our own stomach is the Vritrasura. And who is our enemy? Kshutkalu vai manushyasyya bhratravyah. Hunger is the greatest enemy. So we all fight for that. We all struggle for that. And once all these are wonderful Vedic statements that we see. And once that we consume food and our chitta vrittis calm down from the vikshepa state, they calm down. From the kshipta state, it becomes vikshipta state, better state than kshipta state. What is it's natural if we leave it or allow it to proceed that way, its natural flow, what will happen? We know that. After consuming food, unda mayakam, tondarukkum undu. So, tamas will take over. And you simply will go to sleep. But here comes Angushthamatra Purusha. He says, Bubuksha Jarita Chitta Vikshepa Shamanadurdhvam Anusandheyaha Ayam Mantraha. So when we have overcome the Chitta Vikshepa, now the mind is in the crossroads to allow it to be overtaken by tamas, or should we go back into Vedanta Chintaya? A bridge is created by this mantra, Angushthamatra Purusha. Think upon your Angushta, which represents the Paramatma. And then why Angushta here? I will end with this. Why Angushta here? Can you imagine eating food either through fingers or through spoon without this Angushta? Impossible. So, the Vedas are so insightful that with this powerful symbol of Angushta, which is most essential for consumption of the food, they have associated bringing back the focus of the mind from a state of kshiptata to ekagrata, back to the Paramatma Chintanam or Vedanta Chintanam. Is this not Laukika Anubhuti at the pinnacle? Is it not the example of epitome of Laukika Anubhav? Or mere food consumption, eating of the food can be such a elevating, wonderful experience if we look into such mantras. These are simple mantras, popular mantras. I have not gone into the Rigvedic Samhita. There are many such ideas from the Rigveda. But these are day-to-day mantras that we chant as part of our prashanam, which forms part of our food consumption, part of Sandhya Vandanam. Those mantras themselves are very, very deep in insights. That's why I end here. Shankaracharya and Ramanujacharya, in their respective commentaries, they say, Mata Pitra Sahasrebhyopi Vatsalatara Shrutihi. The Vedas are 1,000 times more compassionate than a mother and a father. Mata Pitra Sahasrebhyopi Vatsalatara. Both Ramanujacharya and Shankaracharya. Ramanujacharya mentions this in his Gita Bhashya, and Shankaracharya in his Upanishad Bhashya mentions the same verbatim statement, because we have great reverence towards our Mata and Pita. Yes, Vinayadhanat, Rakshanat, Bharanat, as Kalidasa would put it. They give us education, our parents. Rakshanam, they protect us. Bharanam, they take care of our nourishment. Of course they do. But with regard to our worldly, Laukika Anubhava. But it is the Vedas that lead us to that Atmanubhuti, which will ensure that we don't undergo this pain of worldly existence once again. So that's why both the great Acharyas mentioned Vedaha as Mata Pitra Sahasrebhyopi Vatsalatara Shrutihi. So with these words, I conclude my few words on Vedanubhuti. I thank Nandini Ramani Madam for this opportunity, and I thank all of you for a patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jairam, for that excellent talk, and thank all of you.